Hi, and welcome to the Crubcast. This week, do game exclusives matter anymore at all for console makers, or are we just in the after effects of old habits? I'm Chris Meekins fan. With me today is Sean Wolf Chaos on. Hi, Sean.
Hi, how's it going?
And Moriarty.
Hello.
This question came to us from one of our Crub subscribers through our Patreon. So if you're over there, $2 a month, you can go into a question sheet and just load us up with questions. And we decided this would actually be a good topic for just the entire episode. And the way they phrased it, in this current time where Sony is releasing their games on PC and Microsoft is releasing even their newest exclusives on the PS5, is it fair to say that exclusives don't matter in the same way they did years ago, even when people on the internet still claim it does? I think, I kind of how I phrased it, I think we're just mostly in the after effects of it mattering because it always mattered, but it maybe doesn't matter as much anymore unless you're Nintendo.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
All right, so we'll see you next week, everybody. Bye.
Yes.
Good job. All right,
game.
everybody. I actually really agree with you. Exclusives don't matter anymore, and I don't think that they have for a while. I think that this is the last generation of exclusives, right? And there's a lot of reasons for that, and I think we can dig into those. But it's gonna be a it's gonna be a little bit of a journey, because I think a lot of people don't really realize how much exclusives mattered, and I don't think they realize how much exclusives have changed. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Because like we can go back to the early days with the console wars, right? Mm-hmm. Like the real ones where it was the mascot wars before it was the console wars, where, you know, you had Alex Kidd. Was he going to be the next big mascot? Or was it going to be, you know, Bonk? Was he going to be the next big mascot? Right? And then suddenly you've got, Bugsy, and all of a sudden you've got Mario and Sonic, right? Yeah. And when that happened, when the Mario and Sonic mascots first came through, and then everybody needed to have their mascots, that's like the first major console war. And then, of course, that changes again later on when we've got Halo, which changes everything, right?
Yeah.
Like completely changes everything. And it becomes, okay, how does Sony compete against Halo? How do you get the Halo killer? Boy, it's going to definitely be, do you remember Killzone? Because, you know,
people on the internet will make you think that you should remember Killzone, and I'm sure they like it, but that was a total non-entity in my anecdotal experience. Like, it was Halo, all the way to Halo, and then exclusive stopped mattering, and then maybe one person mentioned Killzone. I got to be real with the Killzone fans. Like, I was sitting here thinking, like, what was the last one of these exclusives? Like the big marquee, you got to buy the console for this game exclusive, and
God of War.
Yeah. But also, that's
probably the last one. Yeah, the new God of War is probably the last one. You know, you could maybe make the argument that Spider-Man, you know, but even so, did Spider-Man or God of War really sell a console, or was it the idea that the PS5 simply had some exclusives at all? Because I don't think any one of those exclusives sold any. Like Astrobot's not selling a PlayStation, even as good a game as it is, even as much as it is Game of the Year, and it's this truly just work of love. That's not selling you a PlayStation. Maybe some people, right? But it's not selling in the same way that like Sea of Thieves and Hi-Fi Rush are not selling an Xbox. They're just not going to.
Right. It's one of those situations where, like, when everyone bought the PS5, no one bought the PS5 thinking, oh, I'm buying it for Demon Souls or what have you. Just like, I'm buying a PS5 so I can have a PS5 for what might come out. It was just to like own the console itself rather than I'm buying this console for games. And I think that's something we've kind of lost in the past, like probably 10 years, is that you don't really see many consoles coming out with games that it's like, hey, you need to buy this console for this experience, because you don't really get that anymore. There's no console exclusive that's making people buy games. And I think like these companies start to realize that it's like, okay, we can't do that anymore. Let's try different tactics and what have you, because there's not really a console seller, and there hasn't been one for, I mean, we talked about God of War and Spider-Man, but like outside of that, like in the last 10 years, just maybe, I mean, they tried with Halo Infinite and we saw how that went, but also that was also on PC. So
Halo
it's like
Infinite.
one of those, like, what do you have? You know, so much has changed in the zeitgeist of console gaming, and it's just kind of watching it as a kid, like, oh, there's all these games coming out. I want a Sega Genesis, but I have a Super Nintendo. And now it's like, yeah, I have a PC, so I can play anything that is on Xbox.
And PlayStation, increasingly.
Yeah.
And, you know, here's the thing, right? I think really it's the fact that exclusives stopped existing with PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series. And so for anybody who wants to complain, we'll talk about Nintendo, I promise you. But they are a carve-out here.
Hear it ethereally. Like, why aren't you guys talking about Breath of the Wild?
Yeah, we will talk about that, right? But that is a carve-out. Nintendo does not count in this conversation because they're not part of the greater ecosystem, and I'll explain why. Ooh. So with the PlayStation 5 and with the series, right, what is a PlayStation 5 exclusive? Demon's Souls? Gran Turismo 7? Right? That's about it.
Rift Apart, maybe Ratchet.
But but is that a PlayStation 5 exclusive, or is it also on PlayStation 4, right? And on top of that, which of these are coming to PC? Because as soon as they come to PC or they go to PlayStation 4, they're no longer PlayStation 5 exclusive. What series game is a exclusive? None. Literally none. There's not a single series exclusive. So they are all just kind of spread everywhere. And this makes perfect sense, by the way. From an industry point of view, from a developer point of view, boy, it makes so much sense because, like, PC gaming is huge, massive amount of money there. Why wouldn't you take money from them for a game you've already made? Right? And then if you are Xbox or Sony and you're looking at it going, okay, so I own, 50 million units of potential sales, I can port this over to the competitor, right? Yeah. And do it 6 months later or a year later and continue to skim money off of them too. Why wouldn't you do it? It makes perfect sense. And so what do we see? We see Sony with all of their flagship titles on PC, right? God of War, Spider-Man, Horizon, Last of Us, all of them coming into PC. The only things that aren't are Red Dead Redemption 1, and then Last of Us 2, I don't know if that one's out on PC yet, but I know that the remaster is going to be.
Red Dead Redemption?
The
very first one. Yeah, the very first Red Dead Redemption was never put on PC.
That feels weird. That feels really
weird. It's a weird thing. They just never did. And, now we're seeing day one parody with, like, Helldivers and things like that, where they're coming from Sony, developers to PC literally the same day.
Yeah.
And I think now, what is a Sony exclusive? What is that? Does it exist? And I would say no. And then you've got Microsoft, who went all in on Game Pass, right? And now Game Pass is on PC. Game Pass is on your phone. Game Pass is, basically everywhere. And with the Activision, buyout acquisition stuff, they had to agree to put all of their exclusives from Activision on PlayStation and Nintendo Switch, which is, I don't know how COD's going to end up on a Nintendo Switch, but like
supposedly it'll happen.
Yeah, all of these things are everywhere now, so I don't think that exclusives exist anymore. In that same sort of, there is no PlayStation exclusive. There is no series exclusive. It doesn't exist. They're all taking the money that they can get from PC because PC is so big that it's stupid not to take money from them, right? And people just don't care anymore. And here's the thing. So I'm now going to go super conspiracy theorist. And I realize I'm like just taking up all the airspace, but I'm going to go super conspiracy theorist on you here, which is that I don't believe the next generation of consoles is going to be anything like the previous generations whatsoever. And the reason I don't think this is because very recently there was a leak, it was an official posting on the Microsoft blog that showed the newest Microsoft Windows ecosystem for Xbox, the Xbox handheld, which is rumored but definitely going to exist, and then their Game Pass PC stuff. All three of which showed Steam integration. And once you have Steam integrated into the Xbox ecosystem, there's no longer a reason to have sort of an Xbox. Yeah. Right? Like now you've got a Steam machine, and maybe, some of you will remember the Steam machine days from a few years ago where they were trying to promote this Steam computer that you could buy and use on your television.
Are we just inching toward Game Pass being a service sold through Steam?
Yes. Well, so maybe. I think it's going to be ancillary. I don't think they're going to allow Steam to take 30%, right? Like, I just don't see that ever happening where they're like, yeah, we're going to lose 30% of our income to Steam. But I can absolutely see them putting out an Xbox, right? Or an xCloud, or I don't know, something, right? Which is a Game Pass machine that also has Steam on it, and that you can play, backwards compatible games on if you want to, but is primarily a digital first, because we are certainly seeing that with both Xbox and PlayStation, they're going digital first, right? So we see a digital first box, a cloud box that connects to the internet. It gives us our Xbox Game Pass, and it has Steam on it, and blam, you basically have a Steam machine, right, that you can label as an Xbox that would be dirt cheap. This would be $150, $200, man. It would be dirt cheap. Dirt cheap.
You ready for this?
Oh, I think I'm ready
for this.
Sean's going to announce that he's quitting gaming.
No. What you're explaining to me is basically everything Google Stadia wanted to be, and now Microsoft is becoming that.
Yes.
Yeah. Immediately, everything you're saying, I'm like, oh, Google Stadia wanted to do this, but they couldn't. And now Microsoft's like, hey, we have the money, we have people that like us.
I mean, Google had the money too, but the Stadia was it was malinformed, right? Because the entire idea of the Stadia was that there wouldn't be any sort of hardware that could run anything.
Right.
And it turns out that people don't like having everything through the internet, because as soon as you introduce even small amounts of input lag, it just sucks to play.
Right. So
it just sucks to play. So that Stadia part of it is definitely the failure that they made. It's the same failure that like a lot of these things sort of make. And I think Xbox is probably, like, my conspiracy theory is the next Xbox console is a Game Pass box with Steam. And yeah, you can throw in a backwards compatible disc, and yeah, you can go buy a disc if you want to, but that's not its purpose. And then the next PlayStation, boy, I don't know. Sony has a habit of sort of doubling down on bad things in the past, right? For those who have followed the show long enough, I think you understand that I think Sony sucks as a company. It's such a bad company. It's so poorly run. They managed to fail upwards. I don't think that they're not successful. Let me be clear. And I don't think that the PlayStation is bad. I think that Sony as a company is bad. I think that, when you look at them from sort of the standpoint of an actual company, right? Every single department that they have, every single division loses money, with the exceptions of finance, music, and gaming.
PlayStation. Yeah.
And that's it, right? Everything else loses money. They are a terrible company. They just managed to fail upwards. And there's a reason why their investors have been trying to spin off those three different divisions for years and years and years and years. And for anybody who was paying attention back when the PlayStation 5 was announced, it was with the activist investors at the time, it was very clear, and it was made very clear to the entire Sony board, that if the PlayStation 5 wasn't profitable day one, wasn't profitable, they were going to force them to spin PlayStation off into a separate company. So we've got this sort of, weirdness in PlayStation. What do? I don't know. I really don't know. They could double down and be like, we're going to go all in on physical. We're going to go all in on exclusives. We're going to keep doing what we've been doing. But if they don't keep putting things on to PC, right, they're just going to lose money, and that doesn't work. Yeah. So it feels like the door is open. It feels like that sort of thing where, do you remember when Fortnite turned on crossplay?
When they accidentally did it for like a day or two, and we're like, oh, whoops, weird that that's possible, but we weren't supposed to.
Exactly.
We didn't know.
And they were like, good boy, we got to fix this. We should definitely turn it off. And then they turned it off, and everybody was like, what the hell?
Yeah, that was a weird day.
Why? If it's available, why isn't it available? And next thing you know, what do we have? Full crossplay on basically everything. Yeah. I think that Switch, same door is open now. right? Now that we've got God of War, and we've got Spider-Man, we got Horizons, and we've got Helldivers, and we've got all these, Last of Us's on PC. That door is open. I don't think that door can be closed without just pissing off your own customers.
Mm-hmm.
Not that Sony wouldn't do that.
Not that they wouldn't.
Right.
They're the ones that I've had trouble pinning down because I look at Xbox, they're very clearly doing a handheld. And I think in terms of we have pushed against maybe graphical, what do you want to call it, barrier or possibilities for what we can get right now, right?
It's pretty hard to go much harder. Yeah.
Yeah, cycling back to a handheld system that then can ramp up in terms of, wow, look how great this thing looks. That makes sense to me. PlayStation, though, they've been a weird one because they've been trying to do all these live service games, which would require you to be at home.
Every one of them failed.
Yeah, they've all failed. Rest in peace, Concord. But you'd have to be home for those, right? You couldn't take like Helldivers 2 on the bus unless your bus has insane Wi-Fi and you're in a city. But which means they're probably doing a console. Maybe they also do a handheld. But if they're doing a console, do they just hope the momentum carries through and they're like, yeah, of course they'll buy a PS6 even though there's no game for the first year?
That's the other problem. That is the other problem, right? Part of the reason why an exclusive can't exist today is that video games are costing, how much did Spider-Man cost? $250 million? $250 million? Right? And when you consider how much profit is actually built into these games, if you sell a $70 game, you're making, $20 to $30 in actual profit generally. And that means that you have to sell 10, 15 million copies. Games don't do that. I mean, again, we're going to the Mongolian horde of Nintendo there. Yes, Nintendo does it, but like games just don't do that. They just don't sell 10 to 15 million copies. And this is why we're seeing things like Square Enix selling a game and being like, yeah, it sold 5 million copies. Failure. What a failure. We shouldn't have done that. And you've got these mega flops where a game comes out like a Hi-Fi Rush, right? A triple or a double A game that comes out, but it just costs too much money. It just costs too much money. And next thing you know, that entire studio is closed. Yeah. Even with a profitable game that won awards, it doesn't make sense to keep them open because they're going to cost too much money to make the next game.
And like a God of War eventually hits those sales, but usually once the price is off a cliff and you're barely making anything on it at that point. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like when we're looking at all of these sort of things, games are too expensive and they take so long. The average time for a new AAA game is 5 years, right?
Which is wild.
Average. That's the average, just all of them. That means that if you are a AAA gaming studio, right, you are making one game a generation on average now.
It's been said over and over. But I just think back in like when I was in high school, it was like, you got Mass Effect 1 in 07, Mass Effect 2 in 09, like Mass Effect 3 in 2011 or 12, give or take a year for me not remembering right. But like every 2 years, it's like, oh, there's a new Mass Effect. Skyrim came out when I was in like 11th, 12th grade, and that was the last one. And I'm 31 now.
God. Yeah. You look at like COD, or I guess Activision really in general, and Ubisoft for a while there, where they're doing these sort of annual iterative, versions of their games. Right. And people are complaining because they're so samey, but they had multiple not 3 studios. They had like 7 studios working on these games and pushing them full time. They were given 3 years per game with multiple studios. They had different studios working on zombies, different studios working on multiplayer, different studios working on the single player. All of these studios all doing different things, and they still could barely push out a game every year that was tolerably okay. Right? It just takes too long. It takes too long. And this is where I think the Steam integration is actually brilliant. Because there's one thing that PC gaming does that console games have never been able to do, primarily because of how they, the walled ecosystem works there, which is indie gaming, right? Sony's done really well because they do their Sony, whatever it's called, PlayStation Indies or whatever.
They
I
have
don't
their
remember
showcases, yeah.
And they've done really good at like pulling in indies, and you got a lot of indie games that really kind of took hold on the Sony side. You've got all of the Joseph Fares stuff, and you've got, you know, all of the though he's EA, but still you've got a lot of these indie games that did really well on Sony, but nothing like PC, right? Like that is where indie games live.
Yeah.
Steam is the indie game central. It costs $100 to put a game on Steam.
Heck, even just in the last week or two, I've been hearing about a new Lethal Company like called Repo Baby or something.
Yeah,
220,000 concurrent users just out of nowhere.
It's right
out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And you know what? If I'm Microsoft, right, and I go, okay, so we paid $80 billion for Activision, and we paid for all these other studios too, right? I'm guessing under, but a near $200 billion over the last couple of years. We've spent $250 billion trying to make a video game empire. And what we have out of this is Game Pass and AA games, right? And thankfully, and I truly am thankful for it, that Microsoft is a multi-trillion-dollar company, and they can piss away $250 billion.
Throw it out there.
Right? Like, that's great. That's awesome, because quite frankly, we need that, or else it would literally just be Sony and Nintendo, and that's not competition, right? Like, they're not competitive. So we have this world where Microsoft has done this. And if I'm Microsoft, how do I look at this and go, all right, where are we losing money? Like, really, where's the money going, right? If we're taking a look at all these things, what are we spending money on? It's the exclusives, right? It's like trying to make these exclusives and trying to compete with the PlayStation on exclusives, which is really difficult now because PlayStation has, over the past generation and a half-ish, really kind of perfected kind of the idea of what a Sony style exclusive is, right? The Uncharted's and the God of Wars and the Last of Us, which are all the same game. They're all the same game, right? Like,
they found a mold. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. You know, they all kind of look similar. It's like looking at some of the Hemsworths, right? Like
Some of them.
They all kind of look similar. It's the same idea, right? Like, they've figured out what a Sony style game is, to the point where now when a Sony game comes out, you can look at it and be like, oh, that's a Sony game. It just looks like a Sony game.
Yeah.
Right? How do you compete with that if you're Xbox? What do you do? Right? Because they killed Halo. Halo's dead. Halo's dead. They didn't even put in enough money to build a cutscene for them. It's dead. They don't.
Someone's
show
forgetting Halo Studios, man. I got to stop you right there. Remember Halo Studios?
Gosh.
That are maybe remaking the first Halo? No one even knows.
No one knows. They took it away from 343. Like, they took it away from 343. It's dead. Halo's dead. The show is dead. It was terrible, and they killed it. And the games have been bad, and it's terrible, and they killed it. And the Halo's dead.
Forza's still around? Question mark.
Is what?
Forza is still around? Question mark.
Forza. I mean, but really, it's like Sea of Thieves, right? Like, that's their big thing, and that's what's made money for Xbox. This is hilarious. I
guess you're not wrong. I hadn't really thought about it in that way.
Well, yeah.
Right. You know, like, what else do they have coming out? All sorts of stuff, right? They've got Fable eventually, and, like, there's always going to be a new Forza, and there's that new Gears of War, and Indiana Jones did pretty okay, I guess. But Starfield was supposed to be the next one. Starfield was supposed to replace Halo. It was supposed to be their next mega brand, and it just, well, it's Bethesda. You know? Like, Bethesda's all over the place. And we're never going. It's never going to be at that level of sort of saturation that a Halo was.
We live in dark times.
Sean, you seem the most likely out of any of us to have gotten into Starfield. You're my barometer for a normal human being. Did you like Starfield? Did you even play it?
No.
Okay, never mind.
No. Yeah,
I was like, well, Sean likes Skyrim. Maybe like Sean was like the most likely out of anyone here to have just gotten really into Starfield secretly, but
no, like, I looked at it and I'm like, I just kind of am not like, the only, when it comes to like Xbox exclusives. The only one that I've mildly been interested in has been Avowed, and
right, yeah.
I haven't played that yet. So,
and I don't even think that one is fully exclusive.
Not really, no.
Like with regards to Xbox exclusives, what you had, Pentiment, you had Hi-Fi Rush, Grounded. I think Grounded's on PlayStation now too, or it's coming to PlayStation. Sea of Thieves. That's it, right? Yeah. Indiana Jones was immediately not. They just don't do exclusives anymore.
It's just timed exclusives. That's all it is anymore. Just timed.
That was a conference ender, Indiana Jones coming to PlayStation. That was like an announcement for them at whatever event that was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it Summer Game Fest or whatever?
Something like that.
Which had one of the Keeleys.
Yeah.
So like if I am playing as Xbox in this game that we're talking about here, what's the future, right? And I look at it and I go, we cannot compete. We cannot compete with PlayStation on exclusives. They've got their mold. Right. They know how to do it. They just pour in a different color and blam, people buy it, right? It just is. So what do? I need to be able to get rid of that. So I'm going to port it to PlayStation. I'm going to put it on PC. I'm going to put it on mobile if I can, right? We've got King, the biggest mobile producer, ever in America. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to do that. We're going to put it everywhere. We're going to have it everything all the time. And then I'm going to cut back on all of the AAA stuff, and I'm going to leverage Steam, because Steam is already going to be doing all of that. And I can take Steam and I can put it directly onto my box, and I can throw Game Pass and present Game Pass as an equal partner to Steam, right? Where you log into your Xbox and there's Game Pass and Steam. Do you want to buy a game, or do you want to just, pay $10 a month and play all of our stuff? And I can absolutely see people who would look at that and go, that's a great idea, because now I can play my Steam games in a big picture mode with a controller on my television, right? But I also get the Game Pass stuff. And blam, that suddenly makes, in my opinion, Xbox at least a little bit competitive again, right?
It's not too bad when you put it that way. I'm kind of like, I can see it. I could kind of want something like that, maybe.
Yeah, like do bundles, like goal? Starfield plus 3 months of Xbox Game Pass. There you go.
Yes, exactly. And like, you got to think about their goal if they're not able to compete on exclusives and they're not able to win, right? Because they're not able to win at this point. I think Xbox cannot win in this console war. They can't overtake PlayStation. With PlayStation 6 versus Xbox 920, it's not going to compete. I don't think. Too many people have fallen into the PlayStation. So what can they hope for, which is to be on the shelf too? To give you a reason to buy both. And the reason to buy both is that's my Steam machine.
Yeah.
I get the PlayStation, maybe, because I care about the PlayStation, the Sony style games. Maybe I care about that. But maybe I just get the Steam machine that gives me Game Pass. And here's the other thing that, boy, this starts changing up the numbers a little bit. Sony puts those games on Steam.
Yeah.
So now you don't need to have a PlayStation console at all. You can just buy the Steam machine and you can install a year later, admittedly, your Sony games directly there and play them there on your Xbox. So you can play your Xbox on your PlayStation, or you can play your PlayStation on your Xbox. Yes, exclusives are dead.
Yeah. Because especially like the average person, it's like they might want to play the new God of War that's rumored to be coming, right? Whatever side story thing that is. But if they're like, well, I have Game Pass and like 100 Steam games now because they've just been so cheap over the last year of owning this thing, I'm good until that new God of War comes out. I'll just play whatever. And then when it's on my handheld Steam thing, it comes when it comes. Like I'm not in a rush to pay $600 for a box to play that thing at that point. If I'm that hypothetical person, I'm just like, I'll just play what I already got. I already got too much to play.
Yeah,
I think it really does become competitive again.
Yeah.
I think it becomes like arguably very competitive, even if it's a $500, $600 machine, right? Because let's say that they decide to make a proper console, but they still focus on this Game Pass plus Steam identity, right? I really do think that becomes a very competitive alternative.
It makes PlayStation's Steam strategy interesting too, because then they're like, well, We don't want to not get the PC sales, but then we're also kind of helping their box now if we release too soon. But we can't be too late. And I'd like to see them in that pickle. I think that'd be interesting.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I vibe with it.
I can't tell if we have Moriarty through a Discord issue or if we just have a very awkward silence, but I'm enjoying it nonetheless.
I thought it was my headphones because my headphones have been like popping out, and I was like, "Oh, am I going? Okay, no, I'm not gonna be able to hear anybody again. That's cool." Oh, yep, Moriarty died.
I don't know what happened there. What was the last thing I was saying?
That you like me?
Yeah, that you liked Sean, and that whatever I said was like really insightful.
I mean, I just think those are both accurate truths.
They are.
Hey, there we go. Yeah, we were talking about like what does PlayStation do with the we want to get the PC sales, but also now we're helping this other box if we're too. Like,
I think that door's closed, right? Like that's the thing. They're open rather. They have opened Pandora's box. It is on PC now. It just is, right?
Yeah.
Which means that no matter what, you've got this convergence of Sony Microsoft ecosystem overlap, right? Mm-hmm. Unlike anything before. Unlike anything before, where there is no reason to buy one over the other currently if they were to put out another set of consoles, right? Like if they were to just make the next version and it's the same thing, it's just an iterative increase, there's no major change in the way that consoles work. I don't see there being really any reason to buy either of them. It's already been hard enough convincing people to buy a PS5, right? There's so many people who stayed on the PS4 for 3 or 4 years after the PS5 came out just because, well, all the games are released on PS4 anyways.
Still
and
plays
I've
Fortnite.
got a Switch.
Yeah. Because I've been thinking a little during this conversation, because you look at Mark Cerny, who's the lead architect. They just put out the PS5 Pro, in case you forgot, that came out, right? And I feel like they're going to be gearing and tuning their next thing to chase specs, to chase 8K, to chase 120 FPS, VRR, whatever acronyms. PISSR, I think was an acronym still, right?
Yeah.
I hope so.
I hope so. I'm not going to say the resolution bumps aren't nice, but I don't think anyone cares, and not to get too real here, but I don't think anyone's going to be like, well, I want to spend money on an 8K TV in this economy anytime soon.
Yeah, no.
So
I'd rather get shot.
Also, I don't want to buy a PS6 in this economy anytime soon. Maybe also is something to think about.
That is sort of the thing, right? Like a lot of people just bought their PS5s in the last year. That is for them going to be something that they're expecting to hold on to for 4 or 5 years, which means that we are at the end of the cycle, right? Like it is coming up and people are still just now getting into the cycle and they're going to intend to hold on to that for years. So in that world, the game that's going to win out, or I'm sorry, the console that's going to win out is going to be the one that's digital because, you're able to have a larger library, just plain and simple. And that library is easier and cheaper and more economical for the platform holder to provide to you, right? Because if I want to print a whole bunch of games for PS6, I also need to backwards, like that just... And I think they're still putting out too many games on PS4, right? Like that's insane, the fact that they're still supporting this old platform. But they have to because people aren't moving up.
And it's probably,
I don't know, man,
what we'll see happen again with the PS6 to PS5 if a lot of people don't pick up PS6, which then just repeats all of this. I think the last thing people would maybe buy for a while, which leads into the elephant in the room we keep ignoring, would probably be the Switch 2, because it'll at least have its own games, right?
Yes.
I don't know if people will buy it being like, this is my main platform for the next 8 years, because they do still have the PS4 and 5, and they'll probably still play a lot of games better than that will. No hate to the Switch 2. But it will have the next Mario, the next Zelda, and all the things you can't get anywhere else, right?
I think the thing that like Nintendo also kind of like benefits from is their release window with it, because they're not releasing it with like the PS6 coming out or like a new Xbox. It's releasing on its own. We've been waiting for this for a long time. So they are doing it before everyone else gets out of the gate. So it's like, well, I want a new console. I have the money. Okay, why not get the Switch 2 or Wii U 2, which I really hope they call it that. Just call it Wii U 2.
If only. Because if that thing hits in like June, it might be just squeaking in right before it starts getting insane to think about buying a video game console in the world. It might just squeeze right in there and kind of be the last thing he wins for a while. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're definitely going to see, with regards to Nintendo's in an interesting place, right? Because Nintendo isn't competitive, and that's why it's so successful. It is not a $600 system. It's, $250, which feels affordable even to, somebody who's spending $600 on a console. It's like, well, yeah, but I can also get a Switch, and the Switch can be my Nintendo games, or the Switch is, I can buy a couple for me and my partner or my kids or whatever, and you can have multiple Nintendos. But it doesn't hold parity to a dedicated AAA, modern gen console, or even the next gen as it will be, it just doesn't. The Switch is an iPhone 5. I've said it before, but it is an iPhone 5. It is really, really old and very, very weak. And there is no reason to assume that the Switch 2 or the Super Switch, which is what I think they should call it. What a great name, right? Like they should be calling it the Super Switch. But there's no reason to assume that the Super Switch will be any better than a current day phone. And it will probably be significantly worse, right? It's going to be a $400 thing. So what could you go buy today for $400? It would be a secondary phone or an older phone that's 2 or 3 years old, right? This is just Nintendo's way. They've never tried to be at the forefront. They have, long done the withered technology concept, where we're going to do side upgrades. We're going to do the withered technology. We're going to do, old cheap tech and build something cool with it, which means that if you're buying the Switch 2 in a couple of months, you're probably buying a 2 or 3 or 4 year old phone. That's just what it is, which means that 2-3 year old phone, imagine that playing a AAA game that comes out next year. It's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. There's a reason why, part of the reason why Pokemon looks bad, other than Game Freak not caring, is the fact that it has to go onto a Switch.
And you'll maybe get these big game studios throwing you a bone once in a while with your magical Witcher 3 downport, but people should know better than to expect that to be a consistent thing at this point.
I remember Mortal Kombat.
Which means that Nintendo has this weird carve out, right? Like they've got this weird place where they are not somebody's main console unless they are a Nintendo gamer, right? If you're just playing Zelda, you're just playing Mario, you're just playing, Rabbids, right? Like if you're doing that, then it makes sense why the Switch is your thing, and the Switch 2 will continue to be your thing. Yeah. If all you want to do is just play Pokemon and you're not willing to go play Pal World, then you're just playing on the Switch 2, and that's fine, and it works, and it's great. And in a few years, you're going to be complaining about how, boy, it just isn't holding up. Why do these games look so bad? It's just going to be what it is. We're going through the exact same cycle again with the Nintendo thing. And the biggest change with Nintendo is that they are siloed, right? Like they've always remained committed to sort of the traditional exclusive model. They create unique hardware, and they sort of focus on these first party IPs. Whereas very clearly Sony is focusing on the IP in sort of a way, right? But not really. Yeah. And then Xbox is sort of focused, but because they're, A and double A, and there's not really a triple A Nintendo, right? Because they're in these sort of double A spaces, they're able to put out a hell of a lot more games. They're doing way more games, which means that owning this piece of hardware makes a lot more sense for somebody. They have deliberately sort of positioned themselves outside of that Sony Microsoft convergence that we talked about. And they don't compete directly. They sure, somebody might buy COD on the Switch, but I can't imagine anybody buying a Switch to play COD.
But that kind of just goes with the other consoles too. Like, who's buying PlayStation to play exclusive games?
Well, but you're buying a console, right? Like, I could see somebody being like, I want to play Call of Duty, so I can buy either the PlayStation or the Xbox Series. But I don't think anybody's sitting there going, or I could also get a Switch.
Right. But also, you're not buying a Switch for that. You're buying a Switch for those first parties, and that's where Nintendo has everyone by the balls when you think about it. Not to say, like, you know, they're doing tremendous, you know, market. Actually, I don't really know, and I don't really care because I just like Nintendo. But the fact of the matter is that, like, Nintendo knows, hey, we're good at this stuff. Let's just keep it going. Just keep it going. We know what people buy our console for, so let's just keep that going. Whereas, like, PlayStation and Xbox are kind of like finding out, like, okay, we've had that going. We need to find new ways to integrate, new ways to get more people onto our platform, new ways to partner. And it's really interesting to see, like, you know, what innovation versus tradition. That's the way I'm looking at it. Because PlayStation and Microsoft are kind of like trying to figure out ways to innovate. And Nintendo is sticking with tradition as my dog freaks out in the background. Hi, Mocha.
Right.
They have words.
Yeah, it's a thing where I'd be curious to see a Nintendo in the hypothetical where they did let a game breach containment that people want. Because I feel like the second you can buy Zelda, Star Fox Zero with Uncle Grippy on your Steam or PlayStation, then it just kind of falls out from under them and then becomes the kid machine exclusively. Because I feel like once you can just play any of those games better, I mean, there are people who just buy Switch games, legitimately dump them, and then just emulate it on PC so it actually runs nice, right?
Very smoothly, yeah.
Yep.
There is like a growing culture I've seen around that, which can't say I don't understand. But
yeah, it makes perfect sense to me too, right? Like, it makes so much sense when the Switch is an iPhone 5 and I wanted to play this game. And, you know, I mean, when you look at, what was I forget the name of it. I feel like such a fake right now. What was the last Pokemon? It was Pokemon
Scarlet and Violet?
That's it, Scarlet and Violet, right? If you go look at the discourse around that game at the time that it came out, the number one thing I was saying is, boy, why is this game so ugly? And you go and you look at, you know, the games that came before it, like Sword and Shield. Why is this game so ugly? And yeah, why is it so ugly? It, you know, it runs terrible and there's pop-in from like 1.5 feet away and just like, what a bad looking game.
That was the thing, as someone who has spent way too much time playing that game. If it looked bad but ran consistently, fine. We'd still all complain about it, but fine. But man, it looks the way it does and it's constantly dropping frames. The world will glitch in and out visually for like a split second more frequently than I'd like. Like, it's kind of impressive. Yeah,
it's impressively bad. Exactly.
So it's at least at least on PC you can get it to look bad consistently and nicely, you know.
Yeah. So if you're that person, right, like, it totally makes sense.
You're that person.
It totally makes sense, you know. And I think for the average gamer who wants to play these games, it makes sense that these three sort of separate things fall into very separate niches as they become incredibly, you know, expensive comparatively. Now we've got games costing $70, $80, $120 maybe with Grand Theft Auto 5, right? You've got DLCs and battle passes that are pretty much expected, so that the true cost of a game is now about $100, right? Like, you can't, I bought the base pack for $70, but then a month later I spent another $40 because I had to, because I liked the game. So the base price is $100 for a game, you know, and the consoles are $500-$600 with the exception of the Switch. But even the Switch is still not going to be cheap. The Switch is going to be $400 or $500, right? Like, it makes sense. If it comes out less than $400, I would be very surprised. Which means that they're very expensive and the games are very expensive, and it's just, there's so much time and there's so much stuff. So seeing them fall into these very separate places where you've got the PlayStation for the Sony style, you know, exclusives, and that's what that's for, It is for playing the newest Spider-Man 3 and God of War 12, right? Like that's what that is for. And then you've got your Xbox, which is your Game Pass AA games, and Steam. Bam, makes sense. That's what that's for. You play those games. It maybe has some exclusives like your Indiana Jones and stuff like that, but probably not. Right? They're probably also on PlayStation, and they're probably also on Steam. And in fact, I love the idea of being able to buy a game on Steam that's cheaper than just buying it on Xbox. On an Xbox! That's hilarious to me. I can see that future, right? And then you've got your Switch 2, which is really intended to be more about having Nintendo games and having sort of portability. What I think is going to be interesting in that space, which I do believe is the future, is the inherent competition now between the Nintendo Switch 2 and the Xbox handheld and the mobile phone, right? Because the mobile phone has been sort of exclusively the competitor to the Switch, right? The Switch and well, I could have a mobile phone and do most of what you can do on a Switch. Or I can get a Switch and it's a little bit more, larger and a little bit more form friendly and a little bit more gamer oriented. But they have had these sort of competition going on. Now you add in the Xbox, right? And you say that the Xbox handheld's in there. And it's a Steam machine because it's essentially the Steam Deck, right? Because they're not doing a Steam Deck 2 as far as we know. So it becomes the Xbox Steam Deck, which has already shown itself to be quite popular with a certain crowd. Boy, I see that being a very interesting world where we've got those three handhelds now competing.
Especially because Microsoft can put a hypothetical system out on shelves and people actually know the name and would be more inclined to notice it, basically. Because like you tell your average person, like, oh, you heard of the Steam Deck? They'll look at you like you're insane, right? But it's like, oh, the Xbox handheld or whatever they call it. Yeah.
The Xbox Go.
Xbox Go, not bad.
They don't do that. I hope it's not Xbox Go.
Something that's been rolling around in my head is I look at how people are using the Steam Deck, and it's like, oh, you can install a Linux thing and dual boot into Windows and get the Epic Game Store or whatever the hell people with Steam Decks do. And I'm like, man, the moment the Xbox Go comes out and Marquez Brownlee, or I don't know, Linus Tech Tips would be more likely. Linus Tech Tips is like, hey, you can play all your Switch 2 games by just installing this one weird thing and downloading it from this website, and it runs even better than the Switch 2. And then millions of people see that. I just want to see that world. I don't know what happens there. I don't know if Xbox has their stuff so on lock that no one can like mod in easily. But I feel like the second someone finds a way to do that, this conversation we've had today gets even more interesting. But I don't know when or if that happens. It's been fun to think about.
Yeah, we don't know what Steam integration on Xbox looks like. If it is a true open, basically Steam Deck with Game Pass, right?
Yeah. Or if it's very walled off.
I don't see
them
doing that. Yeah, I don't super see them doing that because it's Microsoft. They want to own as much as they can of it.
Yeah.
But if they did do that, right, or at least allow you access sort of to installing and sideloading things, boy, that's a whole different world. I don't see that happening.
Yeah.
I think that it's a Steam app.
Most likely. It crossed my mind because I forget if it was the Xbox One or the Series, but it did have that culture where you could download the emulators or something from the store for a while if you were in like developer mode. So everyone just kind of did that. But
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, we do know that Steam has been pushing out the Steam OS, and they've been talking about doing, a third-party Steam decks and stuff. And I think what's interesting is that you think maybe that Steam doesn't have a brand name, but they do have 70 million people daily on Steam, right? And they have 130 something million accounts. Now that's globally. So how many people are doing it in the US? Probably 20 to 40 million randomly. I don't know, somewhere in that. So 10% of Americans, somewhere 5 to 10% of Americans know the Steam name. I think that you could definitely say this is an Xbox and Steam, and that would, attract a certain kind of attention very strongly. I think that there are some people who really, really like Steam. That it's proven by the fact that Epic with Fortnite money can't take it over, and the fact that Amazon gave up. They gave up when they realized that they can't compete with Steam, right? The Amazon store just can't compete with store. That's Amazon. And
There was
they
that
knew
good,
they couldn't compete.
LinkedIn post from the guy talking about how they gave up. I'll put that in the show notes, actually. I forgot about that. Yeah.
I want to see that because I don't think I've seen that.
Right? Like Steam beat out Amazon. And I'm talking handily. If you read the LinkedIn article that Chris puts in there, I mean, it really is just like he's the former CTO or something of the Amazon games division.
Pretty
and
candid.
It's just basically, we couldn't compete. People won't leave Steam. They really won't. They, become incredibly loyal. And I'm loyal. I think Steam is one of the best, most consumer-friendly things that we've seen in basically the recent past, Not even just gaming. They're just consumer-friendly in general. They give you refunds. If you play a game for 2 hours and think the game sucks, you get a refund. That's something pretty unheard of in gaming for all of gaming.
I think a PlayStation where it's like you make a call and then people will say like, well, if you're really lucky, you might get one, and then you get one refund is how people talk about it, like ever. Because I remember during Cyberpunk's initial launch period, people are like, wait, is this the only game I'm ever going to get to return on PlayStation?
I remember that.
Yeah.
And all the Helldiver stuff too, gosh.
You look back to Steam and you're like, oh, it looks pretty good by comparison. You don't have to go to Reddit and hypothesize with someone over your one refund.
One. You only get one. Everybody gets one.
Just one.
It's just that if we're looking in the future, right, when we're talking about these sort of walled gardens that have existed, where you've got, your PlayStation, your Xbox, I think the new walled garden is services. The new walled garden is subscriptions, right? Mm-hmm. Because if I can lock you into that, especially with like an annual thing or, whatever, and get you feeling used to coming and using my service, and I can get you to give me money and I can then make that somehow profitable. If I'm Xbox and I can somehow make it profitable to make video games and put them onto the Game Pass, right? That is the walled garden. I don't think that being sort of slavishly locking down on these hardware things is the right choice. And I think that Xbox is sort of seeing that now, right?
Oh yeah, from the way Spencer's talking about it, it's very much like we'll do one more, for our fans, and it's very much like and then that might be the last one, feels like the subtext from what I'm hearing every time he speaks.
And as broadband internets and stuff get more competent and more around, and the kind of the idea, or I guess the expectation that you have access to the internet in order to have a gaming console, right? Like it's just sort of expected. Yeah. Because otherwise, how do you get your day one patch in, right? All that kind of stuff. I think that changes the story as we move forward, right? And you sort of see this reduction in hardware relevance, where it doesn't really matter what you've got, whether it be an Xbox or a PlayStation, it doesn't matter. Or, you go and get a third party, this is the worst one, right? Is that you go get a third party Steam machine, if that were to be the case.
Cydia 2, baby.
Yeah. With the cross-platform accessibility and the game design philosophies changing and just sort of all of this, the only thing that we end up having is this middle ground of sort of console area, which isn't even really a console anymore. It's just cheaper computer, right? Like that's really where it kind of sits, is cheaper computer and then handheld. And that's it, right? Yeah. And it's a question of whether or not Nintendo is forced then to close the performance gap and then becomes very, very expensive, because let's say the Xbox Go does very, very well and is powerful enough. But even then, I don't think that matters, because, you look at like the Sony Vita and you look at even back in the day, the what was the Genesis handheld?
The Game Gear.
The Game Gear, God. Right? Like in both cases, these were more powerful handhelds than their contemporary Nintendo handhelds. Yeah. And yet they could not in any way breach, Nintendo's kind of walled thing. So I think Nintendo stays around unless they screw up in some way, they get bought out or whatever, right? Like it's always possible. But we see Nintendo kind of living in that space where they make their own IP and they kind of exist and they do their own thing and they just keep plodding along, making more Pikmin and other, random weird games. And you go, why did you even make this? Oh, it's great. It's fun. Awesome. Cool.
Yeah.
Right. And then you've got handhelds in general, which includes the Xbox Go and your mobile phones, because mobile phones are now, 50 something % of gaming money every year. All gaming revenue, right? 53 something % of all gaming revenue is mobile gaming. So like that's the big boy. There's no consoles and PCs and everything else don't count when we're talking about mobile. So like they're the big boy. And so handhelds are kind of in that space, and you got the Xbox Go and all that. And then we've got our middle ground of cheap PCs, your Xbox and PlayStations and whatever. And then you get enthusiast level stuff.
Yeah.
And I would be really interested in the future to see like an open Steam Deck style thing where you've got enthusiast handhelds, which I think is really kind of the future, is the enthusiast handheld. I would not be surprised if in 10 years, right, you've got enthusiast handheld being a very common thing.
Are we talking about stuff like the Roger Ally with that? Because I could see that market gaining ground over time for sure.
Yeah, just kind of, the ability to upgrade a handheld and to get a very expansive, really expensive handheld, to go ahead and get a Steam Deck that costs $2,000, right? Because that's like what we're missing right now.
Right.
Is the ability to go and say, no, I want one that has, instead of 256, I want it to have 3 terabytes. And I want it to have the more powerful Snapdragon 899, right?
Nice
like
display. Yeah. OLED.
And we see that with phones already, right? Like that already exists in the mobile phone space.
Yeah.
So it seems to make sense that will exist in the gaming space if it opens up even a little bit. If there's even a little bit of that vice grip taken off by both Sony and Microsoft, I think that turns into the future, that we start seeing the real enthusiast handheld space.
Interesting.
Idea. Nintendo. There you go. Sold. Millions of dollars.
I think you did it.
You said that, but I feel like Nico channeled through you somehow. It feels like something Nico would just be like, hold on.
Yeah. He possessed me.
I have a benign old man wish to end this with.
Okay.
And I know it's not going to happen. We've been calling all these things handhelds, and they are technically handhelds. I can technically hold the Switch in my hand, and no. The answer is phones, but I miss something I can put in my pocket and not have to think too much about the condition of. I miss just being able to pull out a Game Boy Advance and go, and then that's my game.
I'm done. Yeah,
I don't have to think about wearing Jinkos to slide it into a pocket or something, or a carrying case, or care too much about the screen protector, right? It's just like it's a Game Boy, and you just pull it out and you play a game.
It's fine.
I'm going to tell you, I actually think that sort of exists, and I think that it can continue to exist, and it's going to be bigger, which is that space where you've got the analogs and the play dates and right, like that space where you've got little companies making these things. What we need in order for this to really explode is one good one that is, again, open. It needs to be open so that you can get these indie games put onto it, because that's where that lives, right? You're never going to get a AAA on a little handheld that costs $100. It's just never going to happen, right? But you can get 50 indie games on there really easily.
You know what?
And if I have it open and it's easy and I can get onto the internet, this is all that really matters.
I just realized most of what we said exists, minus the internet part, I think. But there was that, what was the thing with the crank? The play date?
Yeah, the play date. Yeah.
I guess that kind of exists for what I want, but I don't know.
You want better.
And I think it'll happen. I think that when you've got that space where you have enthusiast handheld existing, right, then the natural evolution from there is to make a D-make, as it were, a lower end entry level handheld. And right now the entry level handheld is a cheap phone, because you can get a really cheap phone for $50 or $100, or it's the Switch. And I really think that dies as soon as the Switch 2 comes out and it's $400.
Most likely.
Needs to make a handheld.
Right? I just, it's not the same thing anymore if you don't have a $200 Switch.
Right. I don't disagree. I don't think I have any more thoughts, though. Do you guys have any more thoughts? Any closing thoughts, maybe?
I think it's just really fascinating, right? Like, I think I'm saying I think a lot.
Proud of you.
And it just, like, this is all...
It's conjecture, but I don't feel like you're off base with anything you've said today.
Yes.
Yeah.
Except for the things that you were off base about, to cover my butt for
which,
later.
of course, and we know this now because this came out in the future, and if only we'd known the things that were going to happen between the time that we recorded this.
That's true.
Gosh.
Even when this comes out in 2 or more weeks, the world could have changed entirely. Who knows?
Yeah, like the next thing you know, the Xbox does get announced and they're like, no, absolutely no Steam. We'll never do Steam. In fact, we're doubling down on exclusives. And by the way, here's Ninja Theory's new game. It's going to be
Xbox 720.
This time we'll market it. Yeah.
Yeah, right? Like, you know, and also Grounded 2 and 3 are coming out. And they're going to be timed with the new Avatar movies for some reason.
I would end
They'll never
everything.
come out.
So just like, yeah, things could change. But I think that from my point of view right now, that feels very, very plausible.
Yeah.
And the biggest question really does come around with how does Sony handle this kind of a space? Because they really become kind of,
The odd man out.
What's the thing? What's the word for organs that you don't need anymore? Like, the pancreas or whatever. Where
There's a really good word, and I bet it's the one you're thinking of.
Yeah.
Superfluous. No.
Superfluous. Yeah, so like it works. I mean, that's not exactly the word, but it's a really good word, right? Because there's like certain things in the PlayStation where it stops being necessary. It becomes superfluous. It becomes this sort of, you know what? I gotta Google it now. What is it called when organs are not necessary?
An added bonus.
Vestigial. That's the word. They're vestigial organs. So PlayStation becomes vestigial, I think, in that case, where it is something that served a purpose and it still has things it does, but it's really kind of been, beaten out by a different organ or, a change in diet and things like that. And I think diet is a big part of it because nobody's paying huge prices for these, games, and live service is dying, and like the diet is changing. There's a reason why Balatro is so big, right? There's a reason why when you look at, what's the biggest game of this particular month? It's that Joseph Ferris co-op game.
Yeah,
right?
Split Fiction.
Like, people don't want these mega 150-hour games all the time. They still want them, obviously, but they don't want them all the time. And unfortunately, it's so difficult if you're any of these developers to say, let's put $250 million in a game that people want some of the time, right?
Yeah. Especially when, and I'm really glad we're in this space now, but yeah, a random game could just pop off and be the flavor of the month, 4 months even, right? And it can just be some random thing some guy made over a couple years, like Balatro. And it works out.
Balatro. Or like a Lethal Company, or like a Repo, or like
Among Us.
Content Warning, or like an Among Us. We've seen this coming.
Yeah.
It's been coming for a while, where these indie games that are triple A, no, they're triple I, or they're double A, where they have a budget. They have a budget for sure.
Yeah.
Right? When your Devolvers are coming out with their $5 million games, like a Cult of the Lamb, right? They have a budget. And those games are then exploding and doing really, really well. And your ultra indies, which are coming out with absolutely unique ideas, where they're saying, hey, I took my brain and put it into your computer, and now you can have it for $3. And people are like, that's all I want to do.
Yeah.
Because I'll be honest, to close it out, like if I'm in the market, I have my PlayStation purchase history, but if I'm looking at a PS6, which is just this thing, but a bit better, or the Xbox handheld, which is Xbox and Steam, and I can take it with me.
Yeah.
And it's going to get all those PlayStation games eventually anyway, then I'm already not in that much of a rush to play anymore.
Right.
Yeah. Xbox Go sounds pretty okay if I'm going to have to buy one,
Yeah. So PlayStation vestigial, superfluous, potentially. We'll see.
You heard it here in the Crubcast. No more PlayStation. Unless all their games become more Astrobot-like, in which case we may need to reevaluate this, but we will see. Not holding out hope for that future.
No.
John?
But, yeah. What's up?
I have homework for you, actually.
Oh, what? Homework. Okay, hold on. Let me...
Yeah. 1, spell down Vestigial from memory. 2, play 30 hours of Starfield and get back to us the next time us three are together.
I like the idea. You know, that's fine. That's fine. I hope that we have a podcast live and we talk about it live before this episode comes out.
Ooh. Now that would be funny. No one would have any idea. Okay. Well, I'm going to call it there. We got through. We didn't even plug ourselves, actually, but patreon.com/crub. If you listen to that and thought, wow, I'd like to listen to these guys and others talk about things that they didn't just talk about that have barely any relation, you can go there. There's all kinds of fun things like an audio podcast where I and the Golden Bolt and our friend Justin are going through all of Pokemon, the anime series. We are 100 episodes in to the series, and we are not a tenth of the way through the series. There's Mario parties, Balatros, all kinds of fun things. Just go and check it out. And if you don't like it, you can probably PayPal charge back and get someone in trouble. We'll see. All right. What? Bye, everyone.
Good night.
Okay, goodbye.